Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell.
All right, it's time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, Denny Seiwell. Denny, welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody.
Now, for those of you watching, some of you will know Denny from Wings. Some of you will know him from his jazz. Some of you will know from the plethora of movie soundtracks that Denny's played on. But every journey has to start somewhere. So, Denny, how'd you get your start?
Well, it's actually my dad. My dad was a drummer. And sometimes he'd leave his drum set up, and if he'd leave the house, I'd just jump on the drums, start batting around, and he'd come home and say, "Get off my drums, damn it!" And when I was 7, he enrolled me in the boys band. My little hometown of Pennsylvania had it's called a boys band. It was kids probably between 7 and 12 or something like that, and then 12 to 16 was the older kids. And it was great. You had a group lesson and you played marches two nights a week, where you learned to read music and stuff. So it was just a great introduction. In high school, I played in the band, the orchestra, sang in the choir, did every musical thing that I could possibly do. And so my life was really revolved around music. So it was a no-brainer. When I was 9, I knew what I was going to do and be.
Yeah. Well, tell me this, early influences. Who did you find yourself wanting to or using as your drumming inspirations?
Well, it was a little later on when my career started evolving a little bit. When I had a career, in the beginning it was nobody. I didn't really have influences. My dad played mean brushes, man. He could just really make brushes swing, and he played with a couple of the local big bands. In fact, in the beginning of their career, he played with Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey's big band because they were from the next town over, Lansford, Pennsylvania. And so he was my influence because I'd hear him play with his small group or the big bands once in a while when I was a kid. And I thought, gee, that's what I wanted to do, So, but later on, when I got into jazz, when I got into the Navy band and we were trading records and learning about who we can see in Chicago or in New York or everything, go see play live. Then it was 2 guys, Mel Lewis, who had a big band, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra in New York. Mel was like, they called him the tailor because he fit the drum part to whatever song that he was performing. He was just a brilliant, great musician. And the other guy was Elvin Jones, who played with Coltrane's quartet. And Elvin was just, I needed Mel's taste and Elvin's animalistic approach to the drum. And I tried to marry the two of those to shape my own style. I wanted to be unique. I didn't want to play like Mel or Elvin, but I wanted to use some of their basic style points in creating my own style, if you would.
Right. Yeah. Now you mentioned you see in shows. What are some of the most memorable shows that you remember from that going to at that time?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I was this is I think I just moved to New York and I heard that I got the gig down at the Half Note, which is a famous old jazz club. And I was in the house rhythm section with Ross Tompkins and Russell George, great bass player and piano player. And we played with Al Cohn and Zoot Sims, 2 of the masters. And then they'd stay for a couple of weeks. Then Bill Berry and Brew Moore would come in, so we'd play with them. So it was just rotating stuff. But this one particular night, across the street from the Half Note was a club called Pookie's. And I heard that Elvin Jones was playing there. This is Coltrane's had just passed away. And he had a quartet with Frank Foster instead of Coltrane. Frank played the tenor, and then he had Jimmy Garrison and McCoy Tyner. So it was a John Coltrane quartet without John Coltrane. And I went in to hear Elvin play, and the place was empty. It was empty. It was like Tuesday night or something. I don't remember, but the place was empty. It was just a dive jazz club down in the lower west side of Manhattan. And so, me being the nut that I am, when Elvin got off the stage, I said, Elvin, I'm just your biggest fan. I just think everything, you've influenced my playing and all this stuff. I said, would it be possible to sit in with your band? What are you doing, you asshole? So he said, sure, kid. So after they played a set, and he took a drum solo that was, the wallpaper was peeling off. It was so hot, you know. And then he said, here you go, kid. And he hands me the sticks. And I got up and I played a song with the band with those cats, you know. And they, well, nod, yeah, sounds good, brother, you know. So we're outside. Back in those days, you know, it was a bad neighborhood in New York, but we're outside smoking, and all of a sudden we see this guy come walking down the street. Looks like we're about to get mugged. Bad looking man. His feet are hanging out of his shoes. He's all disheveled and you know. And the guy gets closer, and Elvin spots him, and he says, "Hey, come here, Denny. I want you to meet Art Blakey." Yeah, my mouth went open too. It was one of Art's bad periods, and then Elvin proceeded to tell Art, "You got to meet this white man. He really plays the drums, man." He threw me up in the air. Elvin was a very physical guy, you know. So it was probably one of the most memorable things. Although
I would think
there were so many memorable things at the Half Note too. Playing Judy Garland stopped in the last time she performed, and we played Somewhere Over the Rainbow, April Showers, and another one of her hits where she could hardly walk because she was so pilled up from her medical problems and stuff. But when she opened her mouth, it was just unbelievable.
Wow.
So, you know, it was a very memorable times. And that gig led me to the studios because people would come down. The musical community would show up Sunday nights to see, hey, who's the new kid playing with Zoot now? And Zoot Sims was a phenomenon. And Al was one of the funniest guys on the planet. So there's nothing but great stories from the Half Note. You made $100 a week, and you played 6 nights a week, 6 sets a night. And if you had a few drinks and a sub sandwich or something like that, you probably owed them money at the end of the week. But it was my training ground for the big leagues.
Yeah. Now you mentioned doing studio work. What were some of the sessions that you played on?
Well, I mean, it starts with doing the jingles where you go in and you do a radio or TV commercial. And 30-second spot, 60-second spot. They send it, then they see you can do it. And then all of a sudden, you have the recording technique. It's a different technique for drummers to know how to play on that stuff. So anyway, I started getting calls from a contractor, Russ Savakis. And he called me in on an album with, what's his name? I can't think of his name now. He died in an airplane crash. John Denver.
Okay.
And it was an RCA project, and some of the hot young blood, the heavy breathers, they used to call us, you know. The young guys were on the session, and it was at RCA Studios, just brand new, beautiful, beautiful studio. And I did a whole album with this guy. I didn't think anything of it, but it just led to the contractors have faith in you that you can do the job, and you sound good, and the artists like you. So I started getting more calls. You know, you do a couple of jingles during the day. Then in the afternoon and early evening, you'd go do record dates like from 2 to 5 and 7 to 10. And we were doing record dates with everybody. We'd make a record in 2 or 3 days. And sometimes we'd even do film music or stuff for a film and stuff like that. It was an extraordinary time in New York, because if you had the gift, if you were good at what your craft, you worked a lot. And through that, I became one of the let's say you got 12 drummers that are doing the best work in town. I was on that list. I made my way on that list. And when Paul came to town, that guy, you heard, Paul McCartney guy, that guy. When he came to town and asked Barry Kornfeld for a list of drummers that were doing the hot sessions, my name was on it, and I got to audition and got the gig. The rest was history.
I would guess that was probably a pretty memorable audition with Paul.
Oh yeah.
How'd that go?
God, I wish I would have had an iPhone in those days to tape that.
So it was the when you went in, did you know it was going to be Paul that you were auditioning for?
No. I got a call from my answering service. It's we all had subscribed. We subscribed to Radio Registry. It was a service that knew where all the musicians in town were, and they had your phone numbers and all this stuff, because there weren't cell phones. So they had a producer called me, hey, I need Denny Seiwell at 3:00 today. They had to find you. Most of the time they could find us at Jim and Andy's bar in between sessions. We'd stop by this bar on 55th Street, and there was an actual phone on the wall, like an extension phone on the wall from Radio Registry to Jim's. And they'd answer the phone. Yeah, what do you need? I need a trombone player. Yeah, I got. Hey, Jack, come on. It was great. Jim and Andy, Jimmy Couliveras had the home for musicians. You could go in there. You could borrow money. You could eat. You could lock up your instruments between sessions. You could do anything you wanted. You could buy dope if you wanted. I mean, everything went on in that place. It was home. And they opened up at 10:00 in the morning. They closed at 5:00 in the morning. It was just, you'd go in there and find the whole Count Basie Orchestra when they were in town, or some of the jazz greats. And if you became part of the scene, that was part of your home, because they could contact you there. And I got a call. I said, hey, you had a session that canceled out. Would you do a demo session for Barry Kornfeld? And I said, geez, I haven't seen Barry in a while, but I was so busy that I didn't do demos. They paid less money, and they didn't turn into much usually. So anyway, I said, well, okay, I had a cancellation. So what the hell, I'll do it. I haven't seen Barry. So they gave me this address, and I went to this address. It was 43rd Street over between 9th and 10th Avenue. It was really a sketchy neighborhood, and it was a brownstone, but it didn't have lights, it didn't have electricity there. So I walk up to the front door, and it's open. There's a guy sitting in the lobby with a desk. And I said, is there a studio here? He said, he points to the basement. I said, now I know I'm going to get mugged. This ain't right. And I walked down into the basement. It's a dirt floor basement with a set of drums in the middle of the dirt floor. And over in the corner, folding chairs, is Paul and Linda. That was it. The whole scene. And I go, hey, you're Paul McCartney. He goes, yeah, I know. What's up, dude? I didn't say dude, but anyway, he said, yeah, we're in town. We're going to make a record, and we wanted to look at drummers. Do you mind playing for me? And I said, sure, I don't mind at all, man. Really great to meet you. You got a guitar or a bass? We could jam together. He says, nah, just you. I went, okay. So I think the next thing that I said got me the gig. I said, well, that makes sense. If you can't get it on by yourself, how can you get it on with somebody else? 70s, 60s, 70s talk. But anyway, he liked that. And he said, let me hear you play. And I said, what do you want to hear? He said, I don't know, just play. So I went, all right, I got this. So I went right into Ringo. Tom-toms, Or I went and did some of the way Paul played on his own record, McCartney album. I love the way he played the drums, by the way. He played songwriter drums, not drummer's drums. And, I gave him a couple of bits of this and that and shuffle and rock time and stuff. And we had a few laughs, and he said, that's all I need. It was great. Thanks. So I walk out of there thinking, wow, I just met a Beatle. I just met Paul McCartney. I can't believe this. Then I go back up to Jim's, and I start hearing that the word is out. Well, no, it was a couple of days later. I heard that the word was out that he was auditioning a lot of the guys. And I went, shit, I'll never get that job. I'm just one of the guys, but there's so many guys that are greater than I am. And so anyway, 3-4 days later, I get a phone call. I'm home for a change in between the jobs. And the phone rings, and pick it up. Hey, hello. He goes, hello, this is Paul. I went, Paul who? Of course. Smart ass. So he said, the guy you played for, oh yeah, that Paul. Yeah. How are you, man? So that we kind of had a Liverpudlian relationship right off the bat. We could take the piss out of each other a little bit, and he liked my sense of humor, and I didn't take it too seriously. He was just another one of the many that we were working with, but he was on top of that. That's for sure. Anyway, so he says, yeah, I want to hire you for this record. And I went, wow, give me a minute. Let me take a look at my calendar and see if I have time for you. Of course, I just threw everything in the air. And I said, yeah, when do you want me and where do you want me? And so it was on. And Ram started. Meanwhile, my buddy Frank Ippolito over at Pro Drum, he said, hey, listen, the Museum of Famous People in New York is going out of business, and they're having an auction. They have Ringo's kit from the Shea Stadium show. I went, get out. Yeah. He says, I'm going to the auction. I've been invited to the auction because I have a drum shop, and I want to buy it. I don't want the whole set, though. I just want the snare drum. Do you want the tom-toms? Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, but I don't know if I can afford something like that. And he said, well, let's see it might not be bad, He goes to the auction and he calls me back and he says, I got the set. I said, wow, that's amazing. He said, do you want the bass drum and 2 toms? I said, how much? He said, $300. I ran down to his business with $300 and boom, and put it on the counter. I said, where are they? So anyway, now I got the drums in between the audition and the call.
Wow.
So I get the call. I show up for the date. Paul walks in and he goes, hey, man, good to see you again. This is going to be fun. Are those your drums? And then he looks, does a double take. It's the Beatles drum set. The Beatles head, the Beatles on it, and my dad's snare drum. And that's the set that I used on Ram.
Wow.
Oh, wow. So, it was pretty amazing that a little jazz gig in the village that paid no money turned into working with a Beatle and joining and co-founding a band called Wings.
Exactly.
Who knew?
Yeah. Tell me this, when you played with him on Ram, and then when did he say, hey, do you want to be in Wings?
Well, he called me about 3-4 months after the record was out, and it had done extremely well, and our relationship continued. He and Linda went to Jamaica and they came back to New York because Linda's from New York, and they stopped up to our pad. I used to live at 68th and Broadway. It was a great place. I could walk to a lot of sessions from there. And they came up and played us all these reggae records, and we go to dinner together and stuff. So 3 or 4 months, the record's out. It's doing really well. It's on the charts, working its way up, even though it got panned by the critics. They did not understand Ram at first, and they just blamed him for breaking up the Beatles. I'm sure that's what it was all about. You're the cause of this. We don't have the Beatles anymore. So they were rough on him. Unjustified, too. So anyway, 3 to 4 months after the record's released, Paul calls me up. And he says, hey, man, how about you and your wife, you'd like to, because we'd come out to California. We'd worked out here. We did a couple of tracks out here, went to the Grammys with them and everything. He said, would you like to, he knew my wife by that time. He knew Monique, she's French from the Riviera. And he said, would you guys like to come over and just take a vacation, hang out at the farm in Scotland? I said, that sounds good. I can always use a vacation. And I just did well financially on making Ram. So had a little extra cash. I said, yeah, we'll be over. When do you want us? He said, yes, come on in. Anytime you can hang. So anyway, I get over there and he says, I miss my old band. And he said, I'm thinking about forming a band. How do you feel about it? I said, I'm in. Didn't take me a second.
I wouldn't think.
No, and Hugh McCracken was just getting off a tour with Gary Wright. So he came up to the farm too. And Hugh, I got Huey on the gig when there was some issues with Dave Spinoza. Paul said, do you have another guy that you like to work with? And I said, well, I love Spinoza. He says, yeah, he's really good. He's a great guy. But he seems to be so busy. He always wants to get out of here to go to the rest of the day that he's got planned. And he said, can you recommend another guy? And I recommend Hugh McCracken. And Hugh came in and did Uncle Albert with us. I mean, he did 3/4 of the record at least. Anyway, Hugh was on vacation and on tour with Gary Wright, and Paul offered him to come up to the farm and hang out. So Huey and Holly, both couples were staying at this Argyle Arms Hotel in Campbelltown, like really a funky hotel. I had to sleep with a hot water bottle between my legs. It was freezing. The bathroom was down the hall. I mean, there's nothing glamorous about working with a Beatle, I'm telling you. So we're up at the house, and Huey says, give me 24 hours. He goes back to we let the wives hang out. We were up there just playing music one day. So that's when he sprung it on us. And Huey comes back the next day. He said, I can't do it. I really can't. And I thought it really stunned Paul. So what I didn't know and what Paul didn't know till just a couple of years before Huey died is that he had a prior marriage and he had young kids from that previous marriage. And he just didn't want to miss their childhood. And so when I found that out and I relayed that to Paul, it made all the difference in the world to Paul, him being the family man that he was. He is. And, it smoothed it all over. But then I said, I'm here. So I went back to the States. He said, let me see what I can do. Stay on hold here. And I was back. I was producing Billy Joel's first record. And Paul calls me up and he says, well, I'm ready to get going now. We got Denny Lane coming up. Are you ready to come back? And I said, geez, I'm right in the middle of this project. I'd like to just get the tracks done so I can take a little break. He says, are you in the band or not? So I left the Billy Joel project and I just went to England and we started hanging out at the farm and rehearsing. And before you know it, we're in London. We're doing Wildlife. Wildlife was done in a weekend. Wow. It was just a first look at this new band, and it was just the four of us, So Paul would do some overdubs, there's a lot of his guitar solos on that and stuff, and I would produce the vocals from the booth upstairs, and they'd huddle around the mic down in the studio, and it was magic. It was just great, and we just ripped through that album. We wanted to give the world a first look at a brand new band. We're starting from scratch here. Mm-hmm. He could have got Clapton and Ginger Baker and all these heavyweight guys to form a band with, but he went back to the Beatles. And he went back to what was it like when we started? We did pretty well.
Yeah, they did okay.
Yeah, so that was that, and we were off and running, and we realized after Wildlife that we'd have to go play live, which is the point of it anyway. And that's when he said, we need another guitar player in the band that's like a good soloist, and maybe somebody with some charisma and sings and stuff. So the roadies, Ian and Trevor, suggested that he look at Henry McCulloch. And we're rehearsing over at we called it the Duke of York Steps. Some official building, there was a little theater in it, and that's where we rehearsed. So Henry walks in, and Henry he's got a presence about him, shall we say. A madman, long blonde hair from Ireland. His guitar is all painted up, and he just looks like he's got that twinkle in his eye, like trouble coming. Brilliant musician, brilliant heart and soul, just a lovely guy. And he walks in and introduces himself, and we start to play. And Paul looks at me, I look at him, that's the guy. And that was it. And he became part of the band, and we did the university tour. That university tour was, I'll never forget the day he said, why don't you guys come up to the house tomorrow and pack a bag? We're going to go on the road. Like, what? What are you talking about? We're going on the road with a pack a bag. What kind of shit is this, So I packed the bag and I show up at the house, We get there, I get there, and Paul says, well, where's Monique? what do you mean, where's Monique? She's down at our crib. He says, well, she's coming along too. I said, what? Oh, yeah, wives, kids, dogs, So he had rented a 12-passenger van and an equipment truck for Ian and Trevor with our gear. And so it's all there parked in front of the house. There's pictures of it on the internet. And we got the kids. So Paul calls Monique up. He says, hey, get your ass in gear. We're waiting for you up here. He says, back and get up here. What? So she had to find somebody to take care of our cat, the upstairs neighbor, they arrange a few things, and just slam the door, jump in a cab, and get up to the house. And as soon as she showed up, we took a picture, jumped in the car, and left. Paul's driving. So that's the way this European the university tour started. And we just drove north and said, well, there's a university at Nottingham. Let's see if they'll let us play there tonight. What? We pull up to the student union. They said, hey, is there a place where we can put on a show tonight? I said, oh, kids are having finals and everything. We got Paul McCartney out here in the van. I went, what? So they go out and Paul would, hey. I said, sure. And that was it. So we would go find a hotel while Ian and Trevor they'd set up the concert gear. Sometimes the gear was in a lunchroom. I think one of the first one was a lunchroom, like cafeteria. And so we had a couple of mics. We had no gear. We had a set of drums, a piano, a couple of amps. It was slim pickings.
Minimalism.
While they were setting up the gear, we'd go find a hotel. And they weren't 5-star hotels. They weren't even 3-star hotels. Some of them weren't 2-star hotels. We'd find one close to the gig. I'll never forget, there was this night watchman, Cyril, at this one place. I think it was York, up north there. And we were all in one of the rooms. The room was so small that if we closed the door, we wouldn't fit. So we had to leave the door open. We're just, doing what you do after a show, playing guitars and singing and stuff. And this night watchman at the desk, Cyril, comes up with a little kid's sand bucket. And he said, one of you guys have that black and white spotted dog? That was Paul's dog, Lucky. And Paul goes, yeah, that's my dog. Why? He says, well, you're going to have to clean it up. He's shat in the hall over it. So Paul leaves for a second and cleans up Lucky's poop. And, that's the kind of memories I had. We'd stop in pubs. And people didn't go nuts because it was Paul McCartney. Oh, it's Paul. Hey, mate, how you doing? And they let him alone. And we'd go in and I learned about my favorite British sandwich. It was a chip buddy. It's a sandwich made of 2 pieces of bread, some French fries, and some butter. Instant heart attack, Yeah,
it's the low carb deal.
Yeah. And, it was brilliant. We did, I think it was 11 or 12 shows. And we tried to stay ahead of the press so they couldn't find us. And we wanted to do this incognito. So we got the band together and we got the band. Every live performance in front of people, you learn so much about the band. And that's what was so great about it. And then we got done with that. They started catching on. So we hung it up. And then I think we went back into the studio. And then, well, before you know it, we were out again on the European tour that was being set up. And that was a 28-city tour. We had the English double-decker bus with mattresses on the top for sunbathing. And it only went 35 miles an hour. So if we'd have 200 miles between gigs, they'd have to send limos out to pick us up on the freeway to get us there in time for the damn gig, But it was a merry old time. I mean, we had nothing. We had no money. In fact, we did have money because at the end of the show at the university tour, we'd bring the guy with the money box in, we'd break it open in the van, and one for you, one for you. We had this big wad of £1 notes, I think they paid 75 pence to see the band, to see Wings.
Wow.
It was great fun.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah, that's the type of thing, it wasn't the most lucrative gig you ever had, but probably has some of the best memories.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd do it again in a minute.
I bet you would. Well, speaking of doing it again, you've got the 50th anniversary tribute to Ram. How did you end up getting involved in that project?
I'm glad I did. It was at first I thought, I don't know, but how does this look? This guy just going to live off of what he did 50 years ago. So as this fellow that I met at several musical events around town here, Fernando Perdomo, who's a brilliant multi-instrumentalist, and he has a studio. And he called me up out of the blue. This is like a year and a half, 2 years ago. Said, hey, we're doing like a little, I forget how he posted, a little band that's doing a couple of songs on iCloud or something like that. I don't know what it was really. So he said, would you mind coming up and playing drums on it? I said, well, why do you want me? He said, because there are two, it's McCartney song, the Too Many People and Some People Never Know. So I thought, that's interesting. Both great songs. So yeah, he wants the original guys. Yeah, I'm free. I can come up. And he gave me a little taste of money to come up and play with him. It was kind of his audition. But he'd done the track. There was nothing left but drums. And so I said, holy, this is really good. This is really good. And then we forgot about it for a long time. He mixed it and sent me the mixes. And it sounds like the track with different people on it, but it sounds great. So now some time passes, and he said, calls me up. It was during the pandemic. He called me up. He said, hey, man, do you know that it's the 50th anniversary of Ram? I said, really? He says, yeah, 50. I went, holy shit. So he says, let's do the whole album. I said, I don't know about that, but he said, there's this younger generation out there, all my friends in their 40s and stuff, Gen X and indie rockers, that this record, Ram, was the most important record to them ever. They want to pay tribute to it with its 50th. I went, that's not a bad premise. Said, if you're serious about this, let me see what Paul's got. So I called Paul up and I explained the situation to him. And he said, sounds good to me. Go for it. That's all we needed, man, because everybody on the record knew that Paul McCartney, their hero, would be listening to their music, their performances. So everybody just showed up and gave 159%, It was amazing. And we did it all during the lockdown. Fernando's studio is 8 minutes up the road here, here in the same part of town, out here in the valley. And he's got a beautiful, it's a funky little garage studio that works great. All I have to do is great drums, all mic'd up. I go in and sit down, maybe put up a couple of cymbals and my snare drum and play. So he said, well, to avoid any exposure, let's just you and I get together. And I did 8 drum tracks one day in 3 hours time. I know the material. I play it at drum clinics and Beatle fests and everything. So, and it's ingrained in my DNA. So I just sat down and banged out the parts. Sometimes I played along to the original CD. So we could start with a drum track that was the same vibe, the same tempo. And I tried to even recreate a lot of the same fills that I did on the original. So it would sound like the original, It's got a great...
You want to sound legit.
Yeah, you can't get any better than that. And then Fernando would send the parts around the country to different guitar players and singers and stuff. And he and I would get together and we produced what went on the record and what did. So my job was to find the performances that really had the vibe of the original record, not sound alike or any of that stuff or phrase alike even, just where it's coming from, where if it comes from the heart like it originally did. And God knows, when you have a masterpiece, that was the first thing I thought, Ram was a masterpiece. And why would anybody attempt even to recreate a masterpiece? So I said, I don't know about this. So when it started coming down, I went, this is really turning out great. The more we did, the better it got. And we made a lot of great decisions, hard decisions. Some of the people that had great vocal performances, I said, no, this other guy is really he captured the spirit of the record. So we have to go with this person or that lady or anyway. That was the hardest part, was saying no to a few of Fernando's friends, and most of these people I didn't know at all. And then at the very end, I said, let me get some of my buddies in on this. It was like Paul. It could have got Clapton and Ginger Baker and all these heavyweights to form Wings, but no. And so we did the same thing with this record, and there's some really fabulous performances. But I got Davy Johnstone from Elton's band, dear friend of mine. Got him to play a guitar solo, and another friend of mine, Joey Santiago from the Pixies, he played some guitar on it. And then we got Marvin Stamm and Dave Spinoza from the original recording. That David did all the guitar parts on Just Another Day. And he remembered them, but he even played them on the guitar, the same guitar he had in 1971. And so he was thrilled to do it. And Marvin Stamm recorded the flugelhorn on an iPhone. He didn't know he didn't have a studio at home, but Fernando showed him how to do it. He sends the parts back. Fernando put it all together. We had this friend of his in Miami that mixed the record and mastered it. And each time I would hear one of the finals, I'm saying, oh my God, this is really good. And I sent it off to Paul. And I heard from his lawyer that he really enjoyed it. I didn't actually speak with him, but Lee Eastman Jr. told me, he said he really thought we did a great job on it. And other interviews that Paul did recently, how he talked about it in some ways, that if anybody ever did a cover of one of my records, I think a good one would be Ram. He kind of hinted at it. So it was a very special project, and it's going great guns. I mean, it sold thousands in the first week of physical CDs,
wow.
which is unheard of in today's marketplace.
Exactly.
And
so
the record company, Jerry Red, by the way, a record label in the UK, it's now called Spirit of the Unicorn Records. I like Jerry Red better, but anyway, the Spirit of the Unicorn released it. It did so well immediately. They're great. They're really good people. They said, all right. We asked if they would consider making a vinyl, and we're making a double album vinyl coming out Thanksgiving time, so it's available for Christmas. It's in the works now.
Perfect.
So we're really happy about this, and there's talk about trying to get 6 to 8 of the guys and women that are involved with this together here in LA and see if we can work up a live performance.
Oh, that'd be neat.
If we can do a live performance that, play LA and maybe some key cities, play London, of course, London, Paris, a few key cities in the States, not go on a world tour or anything like that, but do some shows. I'm old too. Saturday I turned 78, so I can't believe that I'm still doing it.
And enjoying every minute of it.
I am indeed.
That's the key right there.
What else are you gonna do? Sit around,
Well, one of the other things that you're doing is your trio. Let's talk about the Denny Seiwell trio.
Yeah, which I hope we can get back to. That's the record company made up mouse pads and jackets and all kinds. The record company is great. It's Quarto Valley Records, a little label here in LA, and I'm glad that the guy that runs it, Bruce Quarto, he just saw talent in me and knew the story, and it's really unique for a record company to give anybody money to make a jazz record, because jazz records just don't sell, but you know what? We did pretty well with this one. I'm surprised. And he actually released it in CD and vinyl. The vinyl is brilliant, and it was I think the vinyl outsold the CDs, but then when you add everything up, it did pretty good for a record that it got promotion. We had a great promotion team working on it, but we didn't expect it to do great things because of what it is. But I've done the second record now. The first record was called Reckless Abandon. It's got a picture of me in my pool, in between the pool and jacuzzi, drinking some espresso, And that Reckless Abandon album, the guitar player said, "You're really known for this McCartney stuff that you did. Like I was a jazz drummer until you play with one Beatle. Fucks up your jazz career." I'm sorry if I don't curse there, but I hope there's young people listening. But anyway, the guitar player said, "Why don't we do some of those songs from that period of your history with McCartney?" And I said, "That's interesting. Let's give it a try." So we did 5 McCartney songs on Reckless Abandon. And at Beatlefest, they didn't care about it. They didn't want to buy a CD of jazz. But I said, "Oh, there's 5 McCartney songs on that jazz record too." And they go, "Oh," then they lined up and they bought all.
That changes everything.
So that kind of opened the door. But the second album, the Boomerang album, I didn't want to just go to that well again. So I said, let's just do one McCartney song, and we'll do a lot of our original material on this record. Since we had a proper studio, a proper budget, Al Schmidt, God bless him, the late Al Schmidt, actually mixed our record for us. So we did Live and Let Die was the only McCartney song. We did a beautiful trio, an up version of it. Immediately, I sent it to Paul when we recorded it. He thought it was the greatest. He really loved it. I said, "You should use this when you walk on and off stage. Come on, put it on, man. It'd be I love it." He's got his own ideas, I guess. But anyway, these 2 guys, John Chiodini, the guitar player, and Joe Bagg, the organist, I always wanted an organ trio. And the first time we worked together, it was magic. Nobody had to do or say anything. It just came out. And we recorded. The first record was recorded here in my home studio.
Technology is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. I mean, with Pro Tools and all of the stuff you have, the engineer sat here, the organ was here, the guitar was back there, and the drums were over there. And that was it. And people say, "Wow, that's a great sounding. Where did you do that? Capital B?" I said, "No, second bedroom B." But so it's, I can't wait to, if your listeners out there can help with this, I'm looking for someone to represent the trio. We should be playing the summer jazz festivals. It's really hard to find people that are interested in managing or representing a jazz band in this day and age, because there's not a lot of money in it. But if you're like me, you'll do it for free. I've done it for free. I'll do it again for free, because it's for me. It's for my heart. And we all feel the same about it. That's why this music is so special to me. I think absolutely my whole past is what led me to this. I made 200 records for everybody else in the world. Now I'm making it for me. I'm just doing what means the most to me.
I'll tell you what, just real quick here, you mentioned that you did a version of Live and Let Die. Mm-hmm. Now, if I recall correctly, the original, that was a really interesting project because it all came together real quick, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, he read the book the night before. We were all up the house, and he said, "I got to write the theme for the next Bond movie." So he went over to the piano and he said, "Oh, let me see the chase music. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum." Oh, that's good. So there he had the chase scene kind of sketched out, and he said, "Now I got to write a nice melody about when do do do," which is Paul's thing anyway, the melody. When we were young. And so there he's got the melody. And he says there was a lot of boat crashes and stuff down in Jamaica, so we got to have some reggae music. So he thought for a minute, he goes, "What did it matter to you?" We got the reggae bit in there. So we're all sitting around the living room. We got our instruments there. So let's knock it together. So we all start playing, and we pulled it together, found out what parts worked and what didn't work, and we rehearsed for an hour or two, and he must, at the end, we had a nice version of it, so he recorded it, I don't know, cassette or something, but he gave it to George Martin. George takes it home, writes out the orchestra. So now a week later, we're called into George's studio to record it. So I'd never worked at Georgia's studio, Air London, before. It's brilliant to walk into the studio and there's a whole orchestra there. I don't know, maybe 40 pieces, but a whole orchestra. And the drums are live. Everything was live, playing together, not overdubbed. And there was a drum booth that contained the sound a little bit because the violins were right over here. So anyway, we go in and did a couple of run-throughs to make sure that all the notes on the paper were right and everybody's notes were correct. So we said, let's do some takes. And so the sound was up, everything was working. We did, I don't know, 4 or 5 takes at most and had the track. And Paul put down the vocal. Ray Cooper was in the band. He was playing percussion, boom, the timpani, and he put some duck call on the reggae bits. And Paul put the background harmonies on with the rest of the guys, and they mixed it. And we were in and out of that studio in 3 hours' time.
Wow.
3 hours today, they can't get a snare drum sound. But it was amazing, though. It just worked out so well. And it's just the track that I'm best known for. It was such great fun to play. And I always, that's why I thought throwing it on the record was just the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, they kind of foreshadowed some of the work that you would do later because you've played on a lot of movie soundtracks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how did you wind up, within the soundtrack world?
Well, I mean, I knew all of those guys, but there's a difference. When you're a rocker or a jazz musician, they don't trust you playing with symphony orchestras. They want classical musicians playing there. And I knew that Joe Porcaro, who just passed away last year, Joe Porcaro, Emil Richards, another one gone. The guys that did all of that work, I was very close with those guys from the jazz world and everything. And they knew I was a musician, not just some rock and roller or a jazz player. And my friend, James Newton Howard, the composer, I was hanging out with him one day and I said, I'd really like to work with you sometime, because we were friends for many years. I'd worked with him when he worked with Melissa Manchester before he became somebody, And he said, yeah, you can do this shit, because he knew that I could read. I mean, I was classically trained. So I got called into a big movie. I think one of the first big movies I was on was Waterworld. And it's a 110-piece symphony orchestra, 8 guys in the percussion section, really hard music. And I just ripped right through it like it was second nature to me. And after that, James started calling me for all of his movies. And I got to meet and hang out with Kevin Costner. When we were doing a Costner film, he'd come right back and hang out in the percussion section with us because that's where it was going on. We took care of business, but we also had fun in between,
Mm-hmm.
And they're a bit stuffy, the symphony sessions. I mean, a little stuffy. But anyway, these are the guys that make the best music in the world. And there's no film with the LA session world is by far the best in the world, even better than the London Symphony, which I love very much. But you can hear it. You can hear it. These guys know what they're doing. And I was very blessed that I could get in there and be a part of that world as well. Not many guys that come from my background even get a chance in there.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Denny. Well, tell you what, I know you've got other commitments that we need to get you going to here, so we'll wrap this one up. I want to thank everybody for watching as we've had throughout the show. If you go to DennySeiwell.com, you can get all things Denny. That will lead you to all of his social media pages. You get purchase the trio albums on that, which you've actually got a couple other covers as well of McCartney. Coming up is on one of them. And so do check that out. In the meantime, everybody, thank you for watching. Denny, thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I like talking about the old jazz days because it led me to today.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, everybody, have a good night.
Cheers. Bye-bye now.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic. with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.